What up? What up? Hey guys, it's Tyler with Hooksets are free. It is a little bit late here, 9:45 my time here on Saturday night, September 18th. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys can forgive me for not being on last night. I streamed on Thursday night to do a little unboxing, and last night just didn't work out with my kids being a little bit difficult to go to sleep, and me just kind of feeling in the mood. I opted out of hopping on to stream last night. So we will see if anybody is awake and available to hop in tonight to talk about top fall fishing lures. Specifically, my top five, and I will throw some honorable mentions out as well. But I'm going to give people just a couple of minutes to hop in here and see if they want to join to jump in the conversation and talk about my favorites and their favorites. Feel free to give input. I am going to literally run through, in my opinion, what the top five fall fishing baits are for bass fishing. And within each of those categories, I'm going to mention a few different baits that I prefer, that I would recommend more than others. Although I will show you my box and let you know that there are a million other options on the market, as you guys already know that. So um, after we go through the top five types of baits, then I will mention probably another five that I think are honorable mentions, worth noting, worth using in the fall, and can be as effective or more than what I consider to be my top five. One thing to really mention is that fall can be broken into really a couple different categories, since it is a uh, a more dramatic season of the year. In the spring, where we get cold temperatures starting to warm up, you find bass that are starting to feed up in preparation for the spawn, and then spawning prior to then a little bit of post spawn behavior before the summertime. But in the fall, there's not all that spawning behavior. They don't have any of that activity. So what the fish are doing is transitioning from their summer deep spots, moving back up shallow, and beginning to feed aggressively for the winter. So there's really kind of an early fall, mid fall, late fall type of situation, and that can depend greatly depending on where in the country you live and what the water temps are and how the fish react. Water clarity does play a little bit of role as well, but we will get into this list in just a moment. What's up, Ron? How you doing tonight, man? Good to see you in here. I appreciate you hopping in the chat. Looks like there's a few people in here. Jump in the chat if you don't mind. Let us know that you're here. Hit that thumbs up button, and we're going to get into this list in just 1 second. I don't know if you guys were watching over on Baitman's channel, Baitman and Debo. We're doing a live stream tonight. Maybe still are, but I was watching that for a little while, and figured that I would hop in here since I wasn't on last night. And you guys had a couple things that you wanted to talk about, be it fall fishing lures, my rod and reel arsenal, things like that. So I thought tonight we might talk about fall fishing baits. And it's entirely possible that I might make a separate, more consolidated video on this exact topic at another time, just to make it a little bit more search friendly, since it will be a more watchable video than, say, this live stream, which could turn out to be an hour, depending on who's in here. But who knows, Ron? It might just be me and you, man. The family is doing well. Thank you for asking. We had a pretty good day today, so I appreciate you asking. We did all go get our flu shots, so got this rad little kid sticker. Tried to set a good example for my 5-year-old. My 3-year-old daughter was a total champ and listened well to me. Didn't even cry. But my 5-year-old was that kid in the doctor's office that was kicking and screaming, totally losing her mind, and had to be restrained by not only me but an additional nurse so that the one nurse who was actually giving the shot could do so. It was a little bit embarrassing, but such is life with little kids, man. It's more entertaining than it is annoying. So it comes with the territory. But other than that, we had a nice day. Beautiful weather outside here in Colorado today. We can tell that fall is really coming around the corner because we had, I think, 2 nights this week that the lows dipped into the mid to high 40s, which here is fairly cold for this time of year. Now the highs are still on those days. The highs are still getting up into the upper 60s and into the 70s, but we're still having more weather in the 80s during the days than we are in the 60s and 70s. So we will start to see a transition over the next few weeks and into the next month, really. But yeah, the leaves on some of the trees are already changing colors. So now is the time of year where we will probably try to make a trip up to the mountains to do a little bit of a family hike, enjoy the colors changing, and get some good family pictures that might end up being our holiday card photo. But anyway, yeah, it is that time of year for sure. Don't say that winter's just around the corner because it's not. Still got another 2 months and change before the ski hills actually open up for business. So it's around Thanksgiving that all the Vail resorts will open, and I will be able to get on the mountain, and we'll probably really stop fishing and start skiing pretty hard. Now I'll still do some fly fishing in running water, things like that, where I can fish rivers and streams and start targeting trout more than I do bass. But we're a ways off from that, and I fully intend to make the most of the next month or two prior to that, as we're getting cooler temperatures and more aggressive bass behavior. So, what's up, Grayson? What's up, Wayne? How you guys doing? Yeah, I don't think you've been on in a while, Wayne. Good to see you in here, man. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope you guys might hang out for a little while because we are going to talk about my top 5 fall fishing lures for bass fishing specifically. And then when we're all done with that, I'll mention kind of a 5 honorable mentions as well. And I'd love your guys' input along the way because this is more categories of baits. And I am going to mention a few specific ones that make my list or that I'm going to make a point to fish over the next couple of months. And without any further ado, let's just get right into it, guys. It says there's only 5 people in here right now, so that number might go up as we go, but who cares? We don't need to sit around and wait for everybody. So, first on the list is the topwater walking bait. Okay, I would not say that the walking bait is a huge player just yet here in Colorado, at least, but it is a major player in the fall. Topwater baits in general can be very effective in the fall, but I find that a walking bait is arguably one of the most effective uh, simply because you can cover a lot of water to find fish. As I mentioned, there are multiple phases within fall fishing where the fish are going to be transitioning and are going to be moving around as they're chasing bait and as they're relating to different types of cover or structure and yeah, looking for their next meal. So, in my opinion, when you see balls of bait, when you see fish rising, a topwater walking bait is arguably the best option out there. Better than a popper, uh, most certainly. I think better than a wake bait or a whopper plopper. Um, some people might make the argument, and I will bring these up as honorable mentions for either a buzz bait or a frog or a buzzing style toad. Um, but in my opinion, the one top water bait that does make the top 5 for me is a walking bait. So there are really 3 in particular that I want to mention and that I will be using this fall in particular. Okay. Now, this can change from year to year. You know, I have a million different walking baits, as you saw in this box. Okay, so I've got probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 different walking baits, but the three that are going to get the nod from me first this year are one, the Teckle Kick Knocker. We talked about this bait 2 nights ago on the live stream. Okay, this is the same exact bait as the original Reaction Innovations Vixen. And as you can hear, this has a very loud knocker to it. It makes a racket. It's got, you know, a roller ball in the back as a knocker to help aid in casting distance. Keeps it tailed down a little bit as it's resting in the water, but will also make a really loud kind of hollow rattling sound. And then there are some plastic beads up in the head section of the bait as well. So this is an exclusive color that was made for the hookup tackle. As you can see, it is a very unique color. They call it something like sake bomb, I think. I'm not entirely sure. This is a relatively transparent color, but it's more like a matte shad. If I pull out the Megabass Trick Darter 80 in that matte shad color, you can tell that there's a lot of similarities here. A little bit of purple sheen to it, and then that brown back. So yeah, really cool color. Mostly a shad pattern. You're going to notice a huge, a common deal here that is shad pattern baits. Okay, so first is the Teckle Kick Knocker. Second is the 6 Cents Catwalk. And this is like a shad burst, I believe it's called. It's got a lot more flash to it. They do also make a really good bone pattern called Spanish Bone that I quite like. So I'll be rotating between both of these colors depending on the light conditions. If it's cloudy, I'll be throwing this guy. If it's sunny, I'll be throwing this guy. But similar to the Kick Knocker, the Catwalk is a really good bait for covering a lot of water. You can fish this walking bait pretty fast, but it's got a different shape and profile to it. It's a little bit more narrow than the Kick Knocker is. You know, if you see this, the Kick Knocker is wider in nature, a little bit more classic, has that cupped mouth, and is going to walk a little bit more classically and probably push more water. Whereas the Catwalk is actually going to have more of a skittering action. So this thing is going to almost want to jump out of the water as it's walking. Will Perriman in the building and with the $5 super chat. What's up, my man? Appreciate the $5, Will Perriman. You really did not need to do that. Good to see you in here, though. And as always, I appreciate any and all donations. So, wow, very generous of you, man. Good to see you in here. Hope you're having a great night. Also saw Texas Longhorn in here. So he says the Jackal Bounty Hunter is going to replace frogs. I don't believe that to be true, but I am curious to see just what sort of impact it has on the industry and fishermen as a whole. It looks like a cool bait for sure, but I've got mixed opinions on it without even having gotten my hands on it or had the opportunity to fish it. I've heard really good things. However, I was that much more turned off by it when I just heard Ben from the Hookup Tackle mention that that it is a not very durable bait. In fact, he called it, I think he maybe said it, one of the least durable baits on the market. So for its price tag, I find that to be a little bit of a turnoff. So I know that it should be able to skip remarkably well. It's going to stay up on top of the water and walk really well. So it will have its time and place for sure, and will probably cross between, say, a top water frog and a fluke style bait. And I think it's going to be a good bait, no doubt. But I don't think it's going to replace a frog. I'll tell you that much, man. Okay. Ron says, I've never caught a bass on any of those. Are you talking about the walking baits that we're talking about so far? Well, who cares? You know, it doesn't matter what we're talking about because you are a bassless chap, my man. All right. So, first was the Teckle Kick Knocker. Like I said, a little bit more classic of a walking action. This thing's probably going to travel some 12 inches side to side, and it's going to make a lot of noise. Has more of that hollow sound to it. The catwalk, like I said, is going to kind of skitter. It's going to kind of dive down and bob as it's walking, and it has more of a classic knocker sound. Okay, so those are 2 out of the 3. I'm actually going to make an honorable mention. I'm gonna throw 4 walking baits at you at once right now. So I know I said this was the top 5 fall fishing lures, but really it's going to be like 15 or 20. All right. So next up on the list is the Lucky Craft Sammy. Now, the original Sammy is this guy. Super classic topwater walking bait. Very smooth. Has that double sound to it. Casts really well. Walks really smoothly. Also has those plastic beads up front, like I showed you in the kick knocker. But the main downside to this bait is the fact that it's got 2 hooks on it. So Lucky Craft came out with this version of the Sammy, and I don't know if this is the Sammy 105. I believe it is, but they came out with a couple of new walking baits. You know, the Gunfish 117, the Sammy 105, and maybe a couple of others that that have 3 hooks on them. And same goes for the Lucky Craft Pointer 100. They now make that with a 3 hook model, which is huge and a big upgrade on these baits, in my opinion. So this guy will make the list for me. This is a really cool herring color, I believe they call it. You know, it's one of those MS color patterns. Tons of flash on it. Reminds me a little bit of the, you know, MS American Shad, which is just one of my favorite color patterns ever that Lucky Craft makes. So this is in that Gunfish 115, which is also a 2 hook model. So I'm not going to mention the Gunfish right now. I wanted to talk about the Sammy because of its smooth walking action, the fact that it, like these others, can cover a ton of water. So last on the list, and a little bit more affordable of an option, is this Strike King Sexy Dog. This is one that, you know, obviously you'll hear a lot of Strike King pros talk about it, but in my opinion, this is one of the best bang for the buck topwater walking baits out there. I was wondering if I had any of these in a transparent color pattern. This is the only one that kind of fits that bill, but this is actually the hard knocker version of this bait. So this has a different sound profile than the original Sexy Dog, which has that double sound just like the Sammy, where you get a little bit of knock in the tail section and a little bit of rattling from the beads in the nose of the bait. So this guy, if you look at it, is a heck of a lot like that kick knocker. You know, all of these baits were designed after really the Vixen more than anything. So same goes for the River to Sea Rover You know, a lot of people might just prefer to throw a head in Super Spook, and all of those options are just fine and dandy. But for me, it's really going to be the Kick Knocker, the Catwalk, the Sammy, and the Sexy Dog, um, which are going to be kind of the first ones that I go to this year. And now that could change, right? Next year, I might have a totally different set of walking baits that I see as my go-tos. But like I said, being able to cover water to find fish is my main priority in using a walking bait during the fall. You know, here's the Sexy Dog Junior, and a topic that I'm going to talk about very shortly is downsizing your baits in the fall. So, you know, a big thing that I liked about all of those baits that I mentioned is the 3 hooks on them. You know, sometimes if you're getting top water blowups, hookup ratio can be an issue. So I do prefer baits that have 3 hooks over 2. But if you know that the fish are feeding on small bait, sometimes downsizing your presentation can be key. And something like the Sexy Dog Junior in the bone color can be a great option. You know, we've talked about the Kick Knocker Pup. That would be an awesome selection as well. So same category. Okay, let's move on to bait number 2. Nicholas DeVries, and Russ Dennis. What's up, guys? How you doing tonight? Hope you guys are having a good one. Grayson says you're going to talk about fall swim baits. Not a lot this evening, but it is in my honorable mentions that we will talk about after these 5 baits, okay? And we certainly can talk about swim baits as a totally separate conversation on another live stream, because it is a rabbit hole that you can go down. We could talk about glide baits. We could talk about jointed hard swim baits. We could talk about soft plastic swim baits, ranging from tiny little 3-inch guys all the way up to 7, 8, 9-inch soft plastic baits, and when and where you would use all of those different types of swim baits to target different fish. And we could also talk about whether you're throwing it on an exposed jig head or a keel weighted belly hook or an underspin. So appreciate the suggestion, and we will certainly go down that rabbit hole another time. But I will briefly mention swim baits here at the end of this stream. So Matt says, I don't really like the 3 hooks because usually it just causes more issues trying to take them off and getting your hand near them. And usually with the 2 hooks, the hooks that are spaced the same, just with the 3, they put the hook in between the 2 hooks. That would be great on just the 2 hook walking bait. Yeah, I don't know about that, dude. You know, this is a probability thing for me, because I'm going to throw round bend treble hooks more so than EWGs, and this has nothing to do with hookup ratio. And despite getting hooked badly in the thumb just last month, that is not a fear that I have or a way that I want to live as a fisherman moving forward. The more hooks in a fish, the better the odds are of landing said fish. So I want more hooks, 3 hooks over 2, whenever I can, with the type of bait that they are going to slap at and not totally destroy or engulf, okay? Because topwater walking baits, and like we're going to talk about in a little bit with jerk baits, those are both baits that cause a reaction from fish. So they're often going to track the bait, inspect it, and then at the right time, they're going to attack. And they're not necessarily always trying to eat the bait. Sometimes they will swipe at the bait. And when that type of thing happens, you want 3 hooks just in case. Okay? That's me. Russ says, use some fish grippers if you're scared of the hooks. Yeah, no, Matt does use fish grippers. I don't use fish grippers. really never worried about that. If a fish has multiple hooks in him and I'm worried about lipping the fish, I will hold him by the back or the belly. You know, worst comes to worst, then you get a little bit of a spine issue. But I have only dealt with that once or twice ever as well. So I am not concerned about that. Okay. Bait number 2 is none other than my favorite lure on the planet, and that is the chatterbait, homies. So I have moved my chatterbaits into this nifty little flambeau box. This is the, oh, I've told you guys what size box this is, but I find that jigs in general don't fill up full size 3600, 3700 size boxes very well. You get them moving around too much. So this is a smaller box made by Flambeau. I want to say it's the 3300 series. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they're a great value. You can get them at Cabela's or Bass Pro, and I've got them for a lot of different types of baits as well. So we will talk about that. There was one of those boxes that I wanted to find prior to this stream. Oh shit. And I did just find it, so no big deal. Okay. So chatterbaits, guys. This is pretty straightforward. I'm only going to talk about 2. And on another stream, we can go down the rabbit hole of chatterbaits as a whole and what makes all these different models of chatterbaits and bladed jigs different from one another. We've done that before, and I'd be happy to do it again because I'm just obsessed with the category in general. But the jackhammer chatterbait definitely is my number 1. You guys know that, and it's by a long shot. Okay, so there are really 3 color patterns that I will be throwing primarily in the fall here. And first and foremost is a straight white, just a pearl white. Second is this green shad, which is more transparent but has a little bit of chartreuse on the belly, a little bit more of a silverish head instead of white. And then lastly is just a classic chartreuse in white, which has that chartreuse top and the white belly with a little bit of red on the throat. All of these have silver blades. All of them are meant to imitate shad. So again, I talk about this, but I throw a 3/8 ounce jackhammer 90% of the time. I will switch to a ½ ounce probably another 7% of the time. And then rarely will I go to a 3/4 or that 1 1/4 ounce to mix it up and fish deep with a jackhammer chatterbait. But here's a color pattern that I also like is this green pumpkin shad. It's got that green pumpkin blade, green pumpkin top with more of a white and shad type of belly. So anyway, shad patterns are the deal because in the fall, generally speaking, bass are going to be shifting away from feeding on bluegill and more toward feeding on shad. Sometimes they will still be feeding on baby bass, but usually it's going to be on shad. So let's see here. Option number 2, you already know. It's the Strike King Thunder Cricket. Okay. And I'm pretty much going to throw this in white or white and chartreuse because I think those are the only 2 shad patterns that they make, really. So as I've explained before, in my opinion, the main difference between the jackhammer and the Thunder Cricket, aside from the obvious being the hook and the skirt and the bait keeper, is the action of them. So the jackhammer is going to thump quite a bit harder, louder. You're going to feel it in your rod tip more. It's going to that blade is going to go all the way side to side every single time and make contact with the head of the bait. So it is a hard thumping bait, no doubt. And I think that's the main reason that fish eat it so well, is that it makes a racket underwater. And I think just as much as anything, fish are really trying to shut the bait up, and are just annoyed by it coming by and the sound that it puts out. So the thunder cricket, on the other hand, is a little bit more subtle. Like the jackhammer, it is probably second best on the market in terms of how quickly and how consistently it vibrates. You know, of course, they had to utilize the patent from ZMan to create this direct head to blade connection. But this connection does move up and down. So theoretically, this bait will stay down in the water column just a little bit better than the jackhammer, but I haven't noticed a huge difference with that. What I noticed more than anything is the thump to it. I don't know if it's because it uses a slightly thinner blade or a different material, or because that guy moves up and down, or what, but this guy has a more subtle action, a little bit quieter in the water. It's like the blade's moving even faster than the jackhammer. So it's not always making contact with the head as the blade's going side to side, whereas the jackhammer is, and is going to be much louder underwater. So the best description that I can give is, say, a crankbait with a round body versus a crankbait with a flat side. So there will be times and places where a flat-sided bait in colder water, especially, or around finicky fish, can be more of the deal. And I have no doubt that the same is true for chatterbait fishing. So that's all I'm going to mention. The jackhammer and the thunder cricket are going to be the two chatterbaits that I throw, and probably not going to mess around with other chatterbaits this fall. Now, if I was fishing around heavier cover, then I might opt to throw this guy, which I've recently picked up and only played around with a few times. And this is the Picasso Shock Blade Pro in the weedless version. This has a titanium weed guard on it, which I think is a cool deal. But in general, I'm not going to be fishing around quite as heavy of cover in the fall. And so I don't foresee throwing a chatterbait around wood or down on bottom along the rocks as much as I will be using other lures. Okay. So let me catch up on comments before we move on to number 3. Actually, I do want to talk about trailers for 1 second. And, excuse me for not catching up on the comments. You guys feel free to chat as much as you want amongst yourselves. But Matt says, I seen more bites with just the 2, though. 2 hook versus 3. Yeah, all right, man. I'm not gonna read that entire comment right now. Shoot, belligerence. What'd you say your name was? Nick? You say, my sister caught her PB on a black and blue original chatterbait today. 4 pounds, 9 ounces. Got it all on video. Sweet, dude. That's super fun. Riley Belden in the house. What is up, Riley? Hope you're doing quite well. Thank you very much for hopping in here, for hanging out for a little bit. Yeah, me and my family have been well. We got our flu shots today. Got this nifty little kids Band-Aid that I'm rocking right now. You're working 2 jobs and rocking 5 sports. Holy hell. Riley, active as ever. That is insane. But really awesome. Are you a junior or a senior this year? Remind me. All right. Looks like we got Justin No Diggity up in here. What's up, dude? Beefer Baron. I got my biggest bass on a Guggen Squad clickbait. Interesting. I've only fished that bait a couple of times, and I was only mildly impressed with it. So glad to hear that you caught your biggest bass on it. But yeah, to each their own, man. Sorry, I looked over to the side because I've got one sitting right there. Um, I think I bought two of them, and only tied one of them on for a couple of sessions, and that was that. Maybe caught a couple of fish, but definitely did not develop a lot of confidence in it. One, just due to startup time and consistence of the vibration of the bait. I just find that it does not quite come close to the jackhammer or the thunder cricket. So flat banger and Rapala DT been my go-to the last 2 weeks. Yeah, the Rapala DT is going to be killer moving forward, um, especially if you're fishing around rock. Um, so I've caught a couple on the Rapala DT4 as well, man. Um, just in the last couple of weeks. So no doubt about it. The flat-sided crankbaits for me, I'll probably be throwing the Rapala OG Slim 6 and the Berkeley Fritz side in the 5 and the 7 more than anything. Although I do have the KBD 1.5 flat side and a couple of others that have made their way into my arsenal, but I foresee those getting the most use in, say, about a month from now instead of immediately in the next couple of weeks. So when we're talking about trailers on the chatterbait, because we're talking about shad pattern baits and trying to imitate shad more than anything, there are going to be uh, three different trailers I'm going to use. It's all the same style bait, and that is the Yamamoto Zako, which coincidentally I just dropped that box a minute ago. Um, so here we've got the white. This is like a white ice color, and then this is a white and chartreuse. Now the striking blade minnow is also a good option, but is no longer one that I rely on as a confidence bait. And the reason for that is that the Zako for me just has a much more favorable profile. It's a little bit shorter. It's softer, so I find that the swimming action is more natural, and and it's got about the same durability. So I can catch anywhere from a handful to a dozen fish on one single trailer most of the time when using the Zako. And I really, really like the profile. It's got a pretty deep belly. It fills it out well, makes it look like a nice little shad. Second on my list is the ZMan Razor Shads, right? Really, essentially the same type of trailer. It's got that segmented body and a forked tail. And then lastly, which is again a spawn off of the same concept, is the Big Bite Baits Kamikaze Swim On. So, yeah, that's one that I just haven't thrown as much of, but I have a couple of packs of, and need to make a point to rig it up and give it a shot. Really see kind of what I like and perhaps don't like quite as much about it. So, all right, belligerents, glad I heard you right last night. Nick, my man. All right, Riley's a junior in high school this year and killing it. 5 sports. How do you manage such a schedule? That is insane. Baron, I will probably not be sending you those clickbaits, but yeah, you should give the Thunder Cricket a try, man. You will like it. The thing with the Thunder Cricket and the Jackhammer is that you need not be afraid of losing the bait. They are expensive, but they are well worth the price tag. And if you're worried about the price tag, of course you can shop at Discount Tackle and save a little bit of dough while in the process. Um, by spending that more money by saving a little bit. I will go ahead and drop my link as I always do, in case you guys want to go check out Discount Tackle later this evening. So in the chat right now, there's my affiliate link for Discount Tackle. Great place to shop, as always, for the vast majority of these baits that I'm talking about today. So number 1 was a topwater walking bait. Number 2 was a chatterbait. Number 3 is a lipless crankbait. Okay. No, Nick, I fish green pumpkin and black and blue chatterbaits a lot, just more so in the spring and summer. So in the spring, I'm throwing that green pumpkin chartreuse, that Beehite Delight. I'm also throwing reds, so that Heights Hot Craw and the Fire Craw. Those are probably my go-to color patterns. Are kind of like green pumpkin or green pumpkin and chartreuse, as well as a red variation. And I'll throw those in the pre-spawn. And then in the summertime, depending on water clarity, I'm switching between green pumpkin and black and blue, trying to imitate bluegill more than anything, but also stand out in slightly dirtier water. As I talked about last stream, I've been throwing a black and blue chatterbait nonstop for the last month or more and been catching boatloads of fish on the black and blue chatterbait. It's been my go-to color, just straight up. So bait number 3 is the lipless crankbait. So here I've got that box that I'm talking about. This is that Flambeau. Maybe it's the 3300 size. And there are a few lipless crankbaits that I want to mention. Okay. Now, as you guys can see, I've got a lot of lipless crankbaits. So I've got all of those plus all of these. There's 2 in each of these spots. So I've got, 18 or so high-end lipless crankbaits in here, and then probably 50 or more that are kind of all mid-range lipless crankbaits in this box. So my school of thought, the way that I think about lipless crankbaits, especially in the fall, are that there are 2 ways to fish it. One, to target deeper fish earlier in the fall that either have not yet moved up or are moving up. So for that, I'm going to throw 2 different lipless cranks, and that is the Lucky Craft LV500. This again is that MS American Shad pattern, and the Jackal TN70. This in the Ghost Minnow color. So these guys have different sounds for sure. Here's the Jackal. It's loud, has a bunch of different rattles. As you can see inside this bait, it's got 3 different rattle chambers. So it's got one in the tail, one in the middle, and one in the head. As you can see, there is a weight not only inside the nose, but a weight on the lip of the bait. So this guy is made to just stand up on bottom. If you fish this thing along the bottom, it will rest on its nose. So that tungsten lip will give you better sensitivity, let you know when it's on bottom, and you can feel relatively confident that that bait is going to sit with its tail up. The bait weighs 5/8 of an ounce and is relatively heavy for its size, whereas the LV500 is just a little bit longer and a little bit heavier. It weighs 3/4 of an ounce and is a 3-inch long bait. So, yeah, these are definitely in that category of bigger and heavier lipless crankbaits. Now, you could play around and throw a lipless crankbait that has a 1 knocker in it. Like here's the disc knocker. These hooks are tangled, but definitely going to put out a different sound. But I haven't really experimented enough with that to really be able to tell when and where it's going to play as much. Typically because a 1 knocker is going to resemble a craw just a little bit better. As you can see on the inside of this LV500, it's got 2 chambers for the rattles, and they've got 3 different materials in here. But brass and glass is really what the LB500 is known for. Super, super loud lipless crankbait. And both of those are fished theoretically best on a lift and drop, a ripping style retrieve. So fishing that close to the bottom and pulling it up and letting it fall back down. Pulling it up, letting it fall back down, and work that bait back to you down low in the water column. Now, of course, with both of them, you still can fish it on a straight retrieve and through the middle of the water column, or even a little bit higher if you're burning the bait. And there is a time and place for that, which will probably be in about a month from now, when you know that the fish are up shallow or busting on balls of bait. You can get a good bite when burning a lipless crankbait. But while we're on the topic of finding fish, I'm going to go to kind of the ever classic Strike King Red Eye Shad. And I haven't been in this box for a while, so I'm kind of struggling to find my way through it. But here's that same color pattern that I showed you earlier. This is called Natural Shad from Strike King. Really like it. It's got a little bit more of a silvery look with some green and a black back. Although, of course, something like a a chrome pattern with some gold, or a clear chartreuse shad, or just a classic chartreuse sexy shad could be awesome. But the Strike King Red Eye Shad, what makes it unique is that it fishes a little bit lighter than most lipless crankbaits in its size and weight class. So it's the classic 2.5-inch, half-ounce lipless crankbait, but it is a little bit more easy to control its depth. And what you can do is fish it higher in the water column on a straight retrieve that is not burning it, and it will stay up high for you. And once you get into higher percentage areas, you can kill the bait, and it will have a very unique shimmy on the fall that most lipless crankbaits will just stop and fall straight to the bottom, which is a little bit more of an unnatural action to them. So that's where you want to fish them, either ripping off the bottom or on just a straight up straight retrieve. But the Red Eye Shad is one where you can kill it, and fish that are tracking that bait might just get enticed by that wobbling and dying shad look of a bait that's kind of shimmying down. So usually that action of a shad that's swimming and then going down is not going to trigger a bass into biting. But when it has a little bit of secondary action, it definitely can play a role. So the third one that I want to talk about is the Yozuri. Okay. And specifically in the smaller size, but yeah, I thought maybe I would have one on hand in the size slightly one up from this. But the Yozuri lipless crankbaits are unique because, one, they have a higher pitch rattle in them. Two, they're a bit more aerodynamic than other lipless crankbaits. They're very thin in nature, will cut through the water. But most importantly, these guys are heavy for their size. So this little tiny bait is the same size as a traditional 1/4-ounce lipless crankbait. So for example, here's a 1/4-ounce Strike King Red Eye Shad, and here is the Yozuri right next to it. So I don't know what it is, 2 inches or 2 1/4 or whatever it is, but this is the same size bait, which is that kind of tiny lipless crankbait. However, the Yozuri weighs 3/8. So all of a sudden, you find that not only can you cast the bait, but you can fish it more effectively, um, and be able to imitate tiny little bait. So this is a time of year where bass are feeding on really small bait, ranging from 1 to 3 inches in size, and sometimes when the bait is extra tiny, a tiny lipless crankbait like that can be just the ticket. So those are the main three that I want to talk about. Again, we could go down the rabbit hole even further, but I don't want to do that today. So those are the three lipless crankbaits that I want to talk about. The LV500 from Lucky Craft, the Jackal TN70, both as obnoxious, loud, fast falling, rip off the bottom style lipless crankbaits. The Red Eye Shad for finding fish and swimming, more so in the upper part of the water column, and occasionally letting die. You just kill it in the middle of a retrieve and let it shimmy down before starting it back up. And then the Yozuri lipless crankbait as one that you can still find a very castable lipless crankbait that is smaller in profile and heavier for its size. So, of course, right after I talk about it, then I find this mid-size one. This is the Yozuri mid-size, same size as a 1/2 ounce lipless, but this guy weighs 5/8. So if I showed you side by side with the Jackal TN70, it's a smaller bait but weighs the same. So anyway, honorable mention in the lipless crankbait category is the IMA suspending vibe. And the only other one that I know of in this category, at least that I own, is the 6 Sense Quake suspending. I believe it's an 80 size, so it's a big lipless crankbait. But both of those are suspending lipless crankbaits, so they kind of bridge the gap of a lipless crankbait and a jerk bait, where you can fish the bait um, relatively quickly, and it will stay in the upper portion of the water column. It won't fall further than, say, 3 or 4 feet, and you can kill the bait, and it will suspend right at 3 to 4 feet. So you can fish it on a stop and go retrieve and not have the thing dive to the bottom. So really cool bait there. Uh, Good Lord, Riley, crazy schedule. Nick says fluoro or mono for your lipless. I throw fluoro, dude. I pretty much stick to like a 15-pound fluorocarbon. Um, Plus or minus a little bit. I've been messing around with some Yozuri line that comes in 14 and 16, but usually I stick to like a 15-pound Seagar and VizX as my go-to line. He said, "What rod action do you like for lipless crankbaits?" I prefer a medium heavy, moderate action, or moderate fast. Now, theoretically, uh, you could step down and go to like a medium power fast action, but in my opinion, that's not ideal. I prefer a medium heavy, something that's got still a fair amount of backbone on it, but something that's got a softer tip on it. Okay. So, in my opinion, medium heavy, moderate, or moderate fast action. Baron says, "What environment did you say to use the Thunder Cricket in?" Um, Obviously, fishing a bladed jig or a chatterbait around grass is theoretically the best place to use it in, but I've got tons of chatterbait fish, not only in open water, but where there are patches, isolated patches of grass, or even along riprap banks. In fact, I've had lots of success along riprap banks with chatterbaits and the thunder cricket. So I would throw the thunder cricket in the same spot that you would the jackhammer. Just know that the action is going to be just slightly different. Um, so for me, either around grass or around riprap banks are the primary spots that I'm throwing that thunder cricket. Peyton, what's up, wonk, dude? You feeling wonky or what, dude? Yeah, you're a little bit late, but not too bad. I don't know how. I'm 55 minutes in. We are about halfway through. I'll try and speed this up a little bit. We've gotten through topwater walking baits, chatterbaits, and lipless crankbaits so far. Next category is a square bill crankbait. Okay. And I should be able to go pretty quickly with this one because you guys know that I don't throw a lot of square bill crankbaits. Now, I throw them fairly often, but I don't throw a lot of different square bill crankbaits. So I've started to perhaps play with the idea of expanding my horizons with square bills. You know, you saw me pick up the Weston Bass Bite square bill. You saw me last week pick up the dual hardcore square bill. But for the most part, the only two square bills that I throw are the Lucky Craft LC 1.5 and the KVD 1.5 from Strike King. Okay. And again, at this time of year, as we're transitioning into the fall, and my opinion is that fish are getting off of bluegill and onto shad if they haven't already been fishing or eating shad. Typically, I'm going to be throwing a shad pattern. Once again, you see that Lucky Craft MS American Shad. You see more like a transparent, sexy shad. Or you'll see something with a little bit more natural of a shad pattern on it, okay? But I really like the action and the paint jobs on the Lucky Craft square bills. The hooks are a little bit subpar. You know, I believe they put VMC hooks on them. So I am typically going to change out the treble hooks on a Lucky Craft square bill and swap them for, say, owner ST36 hooks. Sometimes I will double up and throw two different types of hooks. I will throw an EWG style hook on the front and a round bend on the back, but that depends on kind of how the fish are biting. Here's one exception. You know, this again falls into that same category that is crossover, kind of blending multiple categories, and this blends a square bill crankbait with a lipless crankbait, and this is the Lucky Craft Moonsault 1.5 square bill. All those other ones that I showed you already, the LC 1.5 is a silent square bill, okay? No rattle, and to me that is important. I find that I have most success, especially in this time of the year, in fishing silent square bill crankbaits. Okay, nothing in there. But the Moonsault, on the other hand, is a different bait. It's got all these rattles inside, 3 different rattle chambers, and as you can hear, it sounds like a lipless crankbait. So pretty cool deal there with the Moonsault. But that LC 1.5 is probably my best bet with square bills. I just find that they run consistently, and I like the color patterns extremely well. Now, stepping away from that, I would go to the KVD 1.5 and a couple color patterns that are going to get my nod, my my attention most in the fall time. are just a straight up gizzard shad. Here you can see I've swapped the middle treble for one of those VMC hybrid bladed trebles. Again, that natural shad that I've showed you in a couple of other baits, ranging from the Red Eye Shad to that Sexy Dog. Really like that. And the green gizzard shad colored pattern. It's a little bit transparent, gives off a green and a tad bit of purple hue to it. Not that you can see that on the camera right now. And then this one's called Oyster, and it's not showing up at all for you on the camera. It's white with a little bit of blue, but it's kind of burning out in the light. So KVD and LC are my go-to square bills, and that's about it. I don't venture much when it comes to those guys. So now, on the same topic of downsizing your presentation and fishing around bait that is small, sometimes I will go smaller than the Lucky Craft or KVD 1.5 and downsize to the 1.0. So I believe this guy weighs a 1/4 ounce. I could be wrong, but as you can see, I've got that KVD Elite Mustad triple grip on the front, and then a Gamakatsu round bend treble on the back. So that's that gizzard shad pattern. Here's that green gizzard. And so I find that the 1.0 has the same great action. It just doesn't dive quite as deep, and it imitates a smaller bait fish. So I've been playing around with that a little bit more the last week or two, throwing it, but haven't seemed to notice a huge difference just yet. Ron wants to know about the Jackal TN60. Here's the thing. The TN60 is a great bait, but it's a smaller size. So it is more that classic 1/2 ounce lipless crankbait instead of the 70 being the 5/8 size that competes with the 3/4 ounce LV500. But the entire TN line of baits has that same feature with the tungsten lip to it. The chin of the bait being made of tungsten, and with the bait being weighted so that it runs nose down and so that it will rest on bottom with its nose down and its tail up. So once you start playing around with the 60 and even the small 50, I think you have to change your mindset of how you're fishing the bait. And to me, that kind of defeats the purpose of using that bait in particular. So I recently had the thought to pick up the TN50, which is a really small lipless crankbait, but designed to theoretically be fished as like an ice fishing bait almost. Like you could drop that thing vertically, sit it on bottom, and just rip it up vertically. But I don't see the TN series of lipless crankbaits being best to be fished as a cast and wind horizontal retrieve style bait. Okay, just my opinion. Like I said with the LV, you could still do that, no problem. It's just going to run a bit more nose down, and you're going to have to fish it faster. So there are other baits that you can do that with, and yep. Riley says, crazy facts, 2 weeks ago was my first time square bill cranking. It was a Berkeley, but any tips that I should know? Sure. Deflection is, it's definitely kind of a common sense deal with square bills, but you're going to get bites when the bait knocks off of something and deflects off to the side or rolls over. But the square bill is known to be the four-wheel drive of crankbaits and is going to come through everything fairly well. So it's one of the best tools for fishing through wood. And so if you've got laydowns, if you've got docks, things like that, a square bill is an awesome bait to use, but you do want it to make contact with whatever you're fishing around. So it will hang up in rocks from time to time. Actually, more than I care to admit or like, but regardless, whatever you're fishing around, you want it to make contact with that cover or with the structure. So one thing that you can do, and a tip that I have to increase sensitivity and prevent hangups and maybe feel bites a little bit better, is what's called worming a crankbait. So you're going to wind it down quickly to depth and to where then you start making contact with what you're fishing around. And once you feel contact, what you can do, instead of just changing your retrieve speed, which is often what you want to do if you're fishing rock or you're fishing deeper diving crankbaits, something that a lot of guys will do is kind of a stop and go, a speed up type of retrieve, to just change the speed and the action to trigger a bite. But with the square bill, one thing that can be awesome is that once you make contact, stop reeling at that speed and just kind of move your rod tip, feel your way through as it's making contact and bouncing along. And if you feel it hang up, let it back out before then kind of winding up your slack and continuing your retrieve. I don't know if that makes sense, but pulling the bait can often allow you to feel exactly what you're knocking into, and also can help you feel when a bass takes the bait and you just lose feel of the bait. So it's a different feel than a hang up is, but sometimes they will just kind of blow on or suck in the bait and not necessarily take off with it. So keep that in mind, Riley. Baron says favorite spinner bait. Not going to talk about that right now, but another time, dude. Grayson, have you ever fished with the 10,000 fish headhunter? Nope. Don't own any. I fished the dark sleeper from time to time. It has been a bait that has been somewhat underwhelming for me. If I'm going to fish a swim bait, I'm usually going to fish a swim bait. If I'm going to fish a jig, I'm usually going to fish a jig. So while it's a cool concept that it can theoretically be both, I think it's more than anything one of those baits that catches fishermen more than it catches fish, or just as much as it catches the other. I also find that the dark sleeper imitates a goby, and that headhunter imitates a bluegill more than a goby. But either way, I don't really prefer those body shapes and styles when it comes to swim baits. So category number 4, guys. No, last one. This is 5. We already went through walking baits, chatter baits, lipless crankbaits, and square bills. Last but not least is the jerk bait. Okay, this is last for a reason, and that is because I'm usually going to pull it out latest in the year. Now, if fish are busting on balls of bait, it can certainly be good to have a jerkbait on you. When you're not getting bit on a top water, a jerkbait can be a great thing to throw in there to get them to bite subsurface, because you can fish more tightly around that ball of bait, where a straight moving bait like a lipless crankbait or a chatterbait, or certainly a square bill, aren't going to be as effective in getting a bass to chase. Okay, so a jerk bait is a great way to catch suspended fish and a great way to catch cold water fish, um, and in general, a great way to trigger bites. So there are three jerk baits in particular that I want to talk about, even though I've got 2 boxes um, full of them. There are 2 that I want to talk about. Sorry, I said 3, right? And I want to get back to the concept of downsizing your presentation. So where everybody might talk about 110 size jerk baits, the Megabass Vision 110, and everything that has spawned copying that bait essentially, and a lot of them are not just blatant copies. We could talk about the I'm a Flit. We could talk about the Jackal Re-Range. Um, there are a ton of really good baits on the market that are that size, that 110, kind of a 4.5-inch bait. But what I want to talk about is downsizing to a 3.5 to 4-inch bait, uh, more in that 95 to 100 size. So first on the list is the Megabass Vision 110 Junior. Okay, couple things to note about it. It is definitely smaller than the 110. So it's funny that they call it the 110 Junior because it's not 110. But this thing has the same action and dives to about the same depth. So we're still talking in that 3 to 5 foot range, maybe 6 feet, depending on the line diameter that you're using. But they make it in a +1 size as well. I'm usually going to fish the standard 110 Junior more so than the +1, and stay kind of in the middle, upper middle part of the water column. This has the same weight transfer system as the Vision 110, same great crisp action, and I'm going to throw this in a couple different colors primarily. If I'm in extra clear water, I'm going to throw something like a Pro Blue. If I'm in not quite as clear of water, or say it's a little bit cloudier out, then I'm going to go to like the Matte Shad. Okay. Now, the reason that I picked this jerk bait instead of, say, the Trick Darter 80, which is also a great jerk bait, is that the Vision 110 Junior has those 3 hooks. Okay. I talked about this concept with the walking baits, and the reason that I chose those ones in particular over the junior size guys, and that's because they have 3 hooks. So this is a bait that you're going to get fish to react to. They're going to swipe at it. They're going to sometimes get it by the tail, sometimes just try to kill it, sometimes just literally swipe at it with their body and not actually eat the bait. So having 3 hooks, in my opinion, is better than 2. And so that's why I would opt for this bait first. Second bait, same concept, is going to be the dual hardcore minnow flat in the 95 size. Okay. So here I've got the same Pro Blue type of color pattern. Beautiful guy there. And then this is more of like a classic IU that's got more flash to it. Or you could go with like a Ghost IU. It's got a combination of translucence and flash. And what you'll find with this bait is that it's got a magnetic weight transfer system, which I often struggle to engage. So that ball shifts to the back on the cast, and then it will move forward and stick to that front ball throughout the cast. So you get a little bit of extra casting distance out of this guy than you will out of the 110 Junior. for a bait that is the same size. But likewise, it has 1, 2, 3 hooks on it, which is rare for a bait of this size. And it has flat sides, guys. So same concept that we talked about earlier with flat-sided crankbaits and how that translates into chatterbait fishing in using the jackhammer versus the thunder cricket. This is where you might want to throw a flat-sided jerkbait versus a typical jerkbait, is if you want just a little bit more roll and flash. So this guy is going to roll and it's going to flash more. So you notice that even with this clear IU, it's got a lot of flash in the color pattern. So all of these guys are very flashy, and those flat sides are going to give off a little bit more flash. So technically speaking, better in sunnier conditions than in clouds, but also in general, jerk baits do better in clear water. So bait number 3, and this should be no surprise to you because you guys know that I love this bait. However, I don't love the fact that the original version and the one that I've already got a dozen or more of only has 2 hooks on it. So this is the Lucky Craft Pointer 100. Okay. And they make this bait in like 4 or 5 different sizes, but specifically the Pointer 100, because I think you have to step up to the 128 before you get 3 hooks on it. But the Pointer 100 is a louder jerkbait and a much more aggressive jerkbait. So not just the sound, but it also, where I said the Vision 110 Junior has a very crisp action, is a little bit more sensitive of a bait. The Pointer 100 is one that you can really hit hard, and it will just be quite a bit more erratic. Now, technically speaking, all of these baits are erratic in nature, but the Pointer 100 is not as sensitive. I mentioned earlier in the stream that the Pointer 100 is now made in a 3-hook version, and I just haven't quite yet gotten around to purchasing any of those baits. And I will certainly do that in this next year or two because I do like to fish the Pointer 100. But yeah, that guy makes the list as kind of my 3rd go-to jerkbait that I will be throwing this year. So downsizing my presentation from, say, that 110 or up to a 130 size jerkbait, kind of in that 4.5 to 5.5 inch size, down to a jerkbait in the 3.5 to 4 inch range in that 95 to 100 millimeter size. 3 hooks is better than 2 in my opinion, and that rounds out the list of the top 5 fall fishing lures for me. Topwater walking baits, chatterbaits, lipless crankbaits, square bills, and jerk baits. Okay. The 5 honorable mentions that I want to talk about are swim baits, like single swim baits, including underspins, spinner baits, jigs, buzz baits, and frogs, including buzzing toads. So let me catch up, see if there's any comments here that I missed. I think it's really just Ron saying, how do jerk baits work in a pond situation? You just have to get to know how deep the water is in that pond. Okay. So there are a couple of things that you can do. One, you can get, a fish finder or depth finder of some kind. I use a cheap little, what the hell is it called, man? It's like a castable fish finder. Let me see if I've got the app loaded on my phone and what they call it. I swore I thought I had it on here, but I don't see it right now. Anyway, um, the more simple way of doing it is either using a stick or, better yet, using like a jig, um, or a lightweight bait that you know has a predictable sink rate. Cast it out there and wait to see how long it takes to get to the bottom before your line goes slack, and just count down, and you'll be able to learn over time how deep your bodies of water are. So some ponds are only a couple of feet deep, um, no matter where you're fishing, whereas some are going to be upwards of 10 feet deep. Okay, sometimes more. And so the way that you need to fish a jerk bait in a pond is make long casts, and really make the most of the section of water where you know that bait is going to perform best. But unfortunately, you have to deal with the reality of, if you're fishing from the bank and bringing that bait back toward you, and it's a suspending jerk bait, or worse yet, a slow sinking jerk bait, you're going to deal with getting grass or muck on your hooks and having to clean that off in between most casts that you're making. So using a floating jerk bait can be awesome, or just using a shallow diving jerk bait. Okay, so two options that I would recommend in that category are: one, the Jackal re-range. So the Jackal re-range is another flat-sided jerk bait, kind of like that dual hardcore minnow flat, but the re-range um, only dives like 3 feet deep. So it is a shallow jerk bait in general. And then another one that is kind of just like that in terms of diving depth is the Rapala Ripstop, dude. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Ripstop, but this guy, it comes in two different sizes. This is the bigger size with 3 hooks on it. The smaller size has 2 hooks on it. So it's like a 90 size and a 110 size. But this bait, again, I think will only dive in that 2 to 4 foot range. And it has this unique tail on the back, a hard plastic tail. And so it is meant to stop on a dime, whether you are fishing this thing on a jerking, ripping style retrieve, or you are doing it on a swimming stop and go type of retrieve. So the rip stop and the re-range are both jerk baits that you can work shallow in the water column and are great for fishing ponds. But aside from that, I would go with a floating jerk bait. And to me, you could just go as simple as the Rapala floating minnow, um, which is like the original balsa jerk bait, kind of the OG jerk bait slash crankbait on the market. There are a few others that I could mention, but aren't coming to my mind right now, especially because I am distracted by the fact that Matt says the Megabass High Float is my best floating jerk bait besides the Rapala. Yeah, that is one that I don't have in my arsenal and kind of wish that I did. So Megabass makes the 110 um, in a high float version. It's not widely available, but you can get them from the hookup tackle. I know that for sure. So yeah, check that out. But the Rapala floating minnow um, and the Rapala rip stop are good options for sure, depending on whether you want a floater or you want a suspender. Okay. So, as those honorable mentions, we'll kind of roll through these a little bit faster because I don't have as strong of opinions about what style, what brand you ought to be using with these guys. But first was a single swing. So some people would throw the Alabama rig, um, in the spring and in the fall. But I'm not one of those guys. I would just prefer to throw a single swim bait or an underspin. So you can go multiple options with this, but I'm going to throw soft plastic swim baits instead of hard plastic swim baits this time of year. And again, I'm going to prefer smaller profile baits. So where in the pre-spawn, I would be more likely to be throwing, the 6-inch Megabass Mag Draft Freestyle, and a lot of baits in this size range, plus or minus 1 inch, anywhere from 5 to 7 inches. I'd throw a lot. Right now, I'm going to downsize to something like this, the Optimum Baby Boom Boom. Really like this guy, 4.5 inches, fits perfect on an Owner Beast 4-aught. Love the action of that guy. I will downsize to I'm getting stuck. The Zako Rhythm Wave, I think, is an underrated swim bait. The 3.8 and the 4.8 would be most appropriate this time of year. One that I think is going to play, but that I have not had a lot of time on the water with just yet, is the 6 Sense Whale, which is a 4.5-inch swim bait. And then, of course, a Kitech, a Rage swimmer, a Beast Coast Miyagi swimmer, are all great options for throwing kind of that small to mid-size soft plastic swimmer. Sometimes I will downsize further than that. And, again, if you find that the bait around you is absolutely tiny, then it is really tough to beat a Megabass Spark Shad in their smallest, the 3-inch size. Okay. The 3-inch Spark Shad, whether you're throwing it on the Megabass Okashira screwhead or you're just throwing it on a straight ball head jig, doesn't quite matter. But this guy on like a 1/8 ounce jig head is awesome when fishing around tiny bait. So those are probably my main go-tos. If I'm throwing an underspin, I really do prefer a weedless underspin, just because I haven't found a ton of exposed hook underspin jig heads that I really like. So sometimes what I'll do is I will improvise and use a screw-in blade. Pro Point Lures makes one with a screw lock keeper on it. And then ZMan in the last couple of years has come out with their own that has a double plastic barbed bait keeper on it. Both of those guys come with swivels and blades on the back, so you could attach that to the belly of your bait to make kind of your own custom underspin, and that's always a good option as well. So that mostly covers it. If you're gonna throw a Kitech or a Rage swimmer, I think this time of year a 3.3 is probably my favorite. 3.8 would be kind of the next best. Grayson says, would a 3.5-inch bluegill swim bait be good? It certainly could be, but again, I've mentioned multiple times in this stream that, in my opinion, fish are getting off of bluegill and onto shad Unless, of course, you're fishing in a pond where there is no shad, then yeah, a 3.5-inch bluegill is a great size because the bluegill that were babies, a few months ago are about that size right now. So that's maybe even a little bit smaller than that. But a 3.5-inch bluegill swim bait is a bite-sized bluegill um, year round and is a good bait. So which bait brand and model are you talking about specifically, Grayson? Matt says the Hazadong shads are really good for a finesse option. Yeah, and likewise, if I'm trying to go a little bit more finessey, we can apply the same principle as the flat-sided baits, which we talked about with jerk baits. We talked about with chatter baits. With swim baits, the Kitech Easy Shiner is an awesome, awesome bait for cold water. Okay. Here I've got it rigged on just a very simple VMC boxer head. I really like how beefy this hook is and how long it is relative to its weight. So this is a 1/8 ounce jig head with like a 3/0 hook in it. And you can still find other ones like the Gamakatsu round ball jig you can find in that same size. Maybe a 3/16 is what you'd have to step up to get a 3/0 hook. But this guy is a flat swim bait. So it is going to have just a little bit more roll to it and a little bit less tail kick. So love the Easy Shiner. Falls into the same category for me as that Hazadong Shad from Megabass. So good point, Matt. Absolutely. Baron says, are you a fan of the Guggen Squad? I know they're getting some flack lately. I'm not new to bass fishing, but I've been out of the game for the last 10 years. Back in it now. I don't know the gist. That's a little bit loaded of a question because basically the Guggen Squad are 5 individual guys, or originally were 5 individual guys who helped pave the way for YouTube fishing and a new era, a new generation of young fishermen. They've done a remarkable job at building their brand, collaborating with other creators online, and just having tremendous success building a business on the internet. The fishing industry as a whole is relatively outdated. Is made up of a lot of old guys who believe that things should be done a certain way and that the only way to make money as a fisherman is to either be a guide or to be a tournament fisherman. But the reality is, social media has changed that, and the Guggen Squad is really the face of how that works. And they've proved that there's a lot more money to be made on their side of the industry than, say, as a guide or as a professional fisherman, quote unquote. So um, I am a fan of the Guggen Squad from an individual standpoint. Like Justin Rackley, Lake Fork guy, really, really respect his fishing abilities. He was a fisherman in college, like a tournament fisherman, and then he was a guide out on Lake Fork for a number of years before he kind of got into the YouTube game. But he's one of the original guys on YouTube, and is a really good fisherman. John B is also an awesome fisherman, just a diehard, obsessed with fishing, and started when he was super young. He and Alex Perrick were buddies growing up and got into YouTube when they were like, I don't know, 13 years old. So we've seen them grow up through YouTube, which is interesting because John has never fallen out of love with fishing, whereas Alex Perrick has a little bit, but more so just fallen out of love with the YouTube game and kind of disappeared. Um, One Rod, One Reel was one of the original YouTube fishermen, if not the original. Um, and he's got a really interesting perspective and a way of telling his stories. He's got an eccentric personality. He films everything himself, POV. He brings one rod and one reel, and he's fishing from the bank. And he's really easy to relate to, but he's also got a personality of like a Mike Iaconelli, just all over the place. Um, has a very over the top style reaction to like any fish that he catches or anything that happens that's out of the ordinary. So, really interesting guy. But again, he's also had some issues in his personal life. The last couple of years has been on and off of YouTube. And then Andrew Flair, aka Flair, um, started about the same time as John B. and Perrick. Was kind of into like the lure reviews and how-to videos way back when. And over time, as he's gotten more popular and started to settle down in his life, get married, have a kid, he bought a ranch and has gone full-fledged into the outdoor scene. He's a hunter, just like he is a fisherman, and he has started to, I don't know, his YouTube channel is all about his farm, his animals, and a lot of catch and cooks, not just within fishing, but with hunting and with farm animals and things like that. So, Lunkers TV, a little bit older than the rest of the squad, former veteran, and you know, got into bass fishing and kind of recorded his uh, experience in learning different techniques, different lures, showing us an underwater perspective, showing us how to rig things. So I really watched a lot of Lunkers TV, some Flair, some John B. when I was really getting into fishing some 6 years ago, because they were doing a great job educating and then kind of transitioned to more of Lake Fort guy. But that was around the time that they all started collaborating more with one another. And that's Lunkers TV really deciding that it was in all of their best interest, um, given the algorithm of YouTube, to start visiting and fishing with one another, featuring each other in their videos, and going on adventures together. So they would fly out and visit each other all the time, since they're from different parts of the country. One Rod, One Reel is on the East Coast in Maryland. Flair's in Nebraska. Um, Lunkers TV and Justin Rackley, Lake Fork guy, are in Texas. Alex Perrick and John B. Are from the Midwest, like Chicago area, but have lived in Texas some. And so they were all kind of getting together in order to collaborate and create content together and accelerate each other's growth by working with each other. And then after a couple of years of doing that, Rob from Lunkers TV had the idea of creating, the boy band of fishing, dude, the Guggen Squad. And so they coined the term, and the idea took off. And in short order, they were creating merch and then decided to create their own line of baits. And that has expanded to everything under the sun these days, which includes rods, line, tools, um, pretty much everything but reels. So they have made a huge impact on the industry, not only as individuals, but also their brand. Um, I don't believe they own the majority of the brand that is Guggen Baits. That is the Guggen squad and the stuff that they sell. Um, I could be incorrect about that, but I'm pretty sure they have a lot of investors and a parent company. So it's a little bit confusing. Of course, they own the rights to their individual channels and have kind of all gone in slightly different directions, especially as the Guggen squad as a whole and the concept of the Guggen squad has evolved. So now there are new guys who are kind of those grinders, those up and comers who are part of the Guggen squad. Some people would call them like the B-listers, right? With those guys, you get like Lojo fishing, um, Yak Pack, and Fishing with Norm, and a whole bunch of those guys um, who are relatively big YouTubers, but took a different approach in how they got to where they are. So, dude, there's a lot to it with that, and I'm sorry to go down the rabbit hole. I like those guys just fine. I think they made an impact on me when I was learning and getting into bass fishing, no doubt. But since then, I don't know, man. I'm not a big fan of the gear that they put out, um, and that's just me. I think they do a good job at using their influence to sell, especially to younger audiences. The average age of the people who watch them or are buying stuff from them is definitely teenagers. And, all the power to them for being able to grow a successful business and a brand. But they don't cater to the avid fisherman, the well informed fisherman, someone who really cares about quality first and foremost, and is wanting variety and just to use the best of the best. They're taking advantage of people who are all in on a brand and just wanting to own anything and everything that is made or sold by these guys. Okay. So that's more or less the whole story, Baron. Hope you enjoyed that and found it entertaining. Grayson says live target, 3.5-inch bluegill swim bait. Yeah, if that's the one that I'm thinking you're talking about, that's an okay bait. Um, Not ideal, but it will work. Matt says they've been getting hate because of certain YouTube creators associated with the Guggen brand that people don't like. But that's with anything. Not a fan, but I respect them for what they've accomplished. Yep. Nick says no shad in my Michigan ponds. Fair enough, dude. Um, then you're pretty much going to want to throw bluegill imitators or craw imitators. That's going to be what the fish are eating. Baby bass too, man. Ron says, are the Hazadong shad and the good peckers made by the same people? No. Hazadong shad is megabass. Good pecker is teckle. Japanese people, yeah, but no, not the same individuals, not the same companies. Bro, you rigged that easy shiner straight as an arrow. Can't do that for my life. Yeah, I've got some practice, dude. Matt says my goal is to open a tackle shop. Went to school for business degree. Hopefully, can save enough to get a loan from a bank to open up one. Because I think you could run. I think I could run a sweet shop that has top-notch baits. Sweet, or baits that people want to use um, or buy but can't because they're hard to get. And I think I could help people around my area catch more fish because I always see a lot of people struggling. I respect that, man. Baron says, thank you so much for sharing this info with me. You're the first person to give me some insight on this. So thank you so much. Going into so much depth. Much appreciated. Yeah, no problem, man. Once One Rod, One Reel was married and not able to commit to moving out to Texas a few years ago. That's when he was still a part of the brand, but kind of took a step back. And then they recruited Lake Fort guy, Justin Rackley, to be kind of that fifth full time member. And all five guys, so Rob from Lunkers TV, Justin from Lake Fort guy, Flair, John B, and Eric, they all moved into a house together, which was sponsored by Mystery Tackle Box for the year, and they lived together for a year, created content together, built the brand, and really kind of got it going from there. So Mike from One Rod One Reel wasn't able to participate in that because he was recently married and lived out in Maryland, wasn't going to leave his family for that. So I believe that Justin Rackley had a slightly different arrangement, as did Rob Turkla from Lunkers TV in when they were living at the house, but they were there pretty frequently, for all their podcast episodes, everything that they would create content wise on a weekly basis. Those guys were there for, and Mike couldn't make it out from Maryland that frequently, so he would still go out on a monthly basis or something like that, and was a part of a lot of the content, but was not really one of the full-time guys per se. Ron says all JDM. It's a good question, Matt. Would your shop be all JDM, or would you sell mainstream products as well? He says that's what I'm hoping to do, but also hard to get US baits or lures that people should be using but aren't. Sort of help with that. Sort of local reports. Interesting. Yeah, cool idea. I wonder if that's a little bit too niche though. You know, maybe not. If you're selling high end stuff and word spreads well enough, and you also differentiate, or I should say, uh, diversify. If you're able to sell in person and online, then I think you could do really well in that space. But if it's a local tackle shop selling to people, brick and mortar retail store, I think it could be a little tricky if you're not carrying mainstream stuff. But if you're selling online as well, dude, that could be a good business idea. So hope that works out for you. Guys, I've been on for an hour and 48 minutes, and it's 11:30 my time. I got to get to bed because I got a pretty busy day tomorrow. Taking my kids to the farmer's market tomorrow morning, first thing. Um, Actually, I got to wake up early to make some of my signature breakfast burritos. Then we're going to the farmer's market. Um, and then we're doing one or two things in the middle of the day while football's on. And then we're going across town to meet up with some friends to do a little pool and hot tub action tomorrow afternoon and evening. So I got to dip out of here and get a little bit of rest. But super fun time hanging out with you guys tonight. Thank you for being here, and I will see you guys very soon. If you have any questions, concerns, um, topics that you want to talk about in a future live stream, let me know. Okay, guys. Good seeing you. Have a good rest of your weekend. Go Broncos.